WorldComEDU. Elite Children's Classics.
The Little Mermaid. Far out in the deep, deep blue sea lived the sea people. In the deepest part was the Sea King's beautiful castle. The walls were made of coral, and the roof was made of pearls and shells. There, the king lived with his family. His mother was an excellent grandmother to her 6 granddaughters, the mermaid princesses. Each daughter was beautiful, but the most beautiful was the youngest. She had lovely skin and eyes, and like the others, had no legs or feet because her body ended in a fishtail. She was a quiet and thoughtful child whose 2 favorite things were red flowers and the stone statue of a boy that she had found in a sunken ship. She put the statue in her little garden and surrounded it with flowers. She loved hearing the old grandmother tell stories about the world of men who lived up above on the land. Grandmother told how the flowers there had a lovely smell. The trees were green, and the birds sang so loudly everyone could hear them. Of course, the little mermaid had never seen a real bird, so she did not understand such things. Grandmother said to the sisters, "When you are 15, dear children, you shall rise up out of the sea. You will sit on the rocks in the moonlight and watch the great ships sail by. You will also see forests and towns." Each sister promised that she would return and tell the others what she had seen of the life above the sea, especially what was the most beautiful thing each had seen. No one was more anxious to hear the stories than the little mermaid, for she had many years to wait until her 15th birthday. Many nights she would look through the dark blue water where she could faintly see the moon and the stars. When a black cloud passed over, she knew it was either a whale overhead or a ship full of people. The people certainly never thought a pretty mermaid was watching them from below. The 15th birthday of the oldest sister came. Such excitement for everyone! When she returned, she told 100 things, but the best thing she said was to lie in the moonlight on a sandbank in the sea and to watch the twinkling lights of a large town. She had also heard the music and the noise and bustle of carriage and men. Oh, how the little mermaid listened! She tried to imagine all the wondrous things her sister had seen. The next year, the second sister was told by her grandmother that she could rise up through the water. She did so just as the sun was setting. How beautiful the golden sky looked with the purple clouds! Some swans flew overhead. She swam towards them, but the sun set and everything became dark. The next sister was the most courageous. She chose to swim up a wide stream that flowed into the big sea. She saw green hills covered with vines and castles and forests. She heard birds singing, and the sun was so warm on her face that she had to dive under the water to get cool. In a tiny bay, some little children were playing in the water. They had no tails. She wanted to play with them, but they were frightened by her. a black dog barked loudly at her. Not knowing what a dog was, she was also afraid and swam back home. The fourth sister was not so bold. She decided to swim to the middle of the sea. From there she could see very far in all directions. The fifth sister's birthday came in the winter, and so she saw things the others had not seen. The sea looked green instead of blue, and huge icebergs floated about in the water. They looked like pearls, but shined like diamonds. She sat on one of the largest icebergs and watched the ships. Towards evening, the sky filled with clouds, which began to thunder and lightning. The iceberg was lifted high up by the big waves, and the sister watched, fascinated by the angry sea. After each birthday, the sisters were given the freedom to go wherever they pleased. At first, the new sights and sounds were thrilling, but as time went by, the newness became ordinary, and each sister returned to the deep sea and her comfortable home, thinking it was the best place of all. Many evenings, however, the 5 older sisters would swim to the surface of the sea, singing together. When a bad storm was coming, and the sisters thought a ship might sink, they would swim in front of the ship. They would sing lovely songs, telling the sailors not to be afraid, because it was beautiful at the bottom of the sea. But, of course, the sailors did not understand, and thought the singing was the sound of the storm. They did not see beauty at the bottom of the sea, only their deaths. The little mermaid was terribly lonely when her sisters swam away. She wanted to cry, but mermaids cannot cry, and so she suffered even more.
Oh, if only I were 15,
she thought.
I would love the world above the sea and the people there.
At last, her 15th birthday arrived. "You are now grown up," said Grandmother as she put a wreath of white lilies in the child's hair. Every petal was half a pearl. The sun was just setting as the little mermaid came to the surface of the sea. The sky was red and the stars were bright. She swam to a large ship nearby. There was music, laughter, and hundreds of colored lights. The little mermaid looked in the windows. She could see many people, but the most handsome was the black-eyed prince. Everyone was celebrating the prince's 16th birthday. The little mermaid could not take her eyes off of him, and she watched for many hours. Suddenly, a strong wind began to blow, and rain began falling. There was thunder and lightning, and the ship was blown about. The little mermaid enjoyed such sport, but the sailors were very afraid. There was a loud crack, and the ship broke apart. Sailors were everywhere in the water. Fearing for the prince's life, the little mermaid swam until she found him. He must not die. She held his head above the water as they floated over the waves. When morning came, the storm had passed by. There was nothing left of the ship. The little mermaid looked at the sleeping prince, kissed his face and combed back his wet hair. How much he looked like the stone statue in her garden! She kissed him again and hoped he would live forever. She knew she must find land for him to rest upon, so the mermaid swam until she came to a lovely beach. There she laid the prince upon the white sand, making certain that his face was in the warm sunshine. She then swam away and hid behind some rocks, waiting for someone to find him. In a short time, a young girl discovered him. She seemed to be very frightened, but only for a moment. Then she brought more people. The little mermaid saw that the prince was coming to life, and that he smiled at everybody around him. He, however, did not smile at her. He did not know that she had saved him. How sad she was! She sorrowfully dived into the deep water and returned to her father's palace. Always a gentle and quiet child, the little mermaid was even more so now. Everyone noticed her sadness, but she told them nothing. She often returned to the sandy beach. Summer and winter passed, but she did not see the prince. Her only comfort was holding her beautiful stone statue, which looked like the prince. At last, she could hold her sadness no longer, and she told one of her sisters about the prince. The sister knew of him and where his palace was. "Come, little sister," she said. "I will show you." Many a night after that, the little mermaid spent watching the prince when he thought he was alone in the moonlight. She thought of him constantly, and yet he did not even know about her. More and more she began to love mankind. There was so much she wished to know.
Do men die?
She asked her grandmother. "Yes, child. Men die, but they have a soul that continues to live forever in heaven. We mermaids live much longer, even to 300 years. But when we die, we become foam on the surface of the sea. We have no souls."
Oh, I would gladly give all those hundreds of years for a chance to live as a human being for only one day and to have an immortal soul,
cried the little mermaid.
"What can I do, Grandmother?"
"There is only one thing you can do," answered Grandmother. "If a man loved you with all his heart and married you, then his soul would become part of you. But such a thing could never happen to you, little mermaid, because your fishtail is considered ugly by men. No man would want you, so forget such an idea. Tonight we will dance and you shall sing for us with your sweet voice. Soon you will forget about men." But the little mermaid could not forget. She decided to ask the great and fearful sea witch for help. Off she swam to a cold, dark part of the sea where she had never been. She found the awful woman in her home, built of white bones of drowned sailors. She was surrounded by ugly sea creatures.
I know why you have come.
She jeered at the little mermaid.
You want 2 legs so the prince will fall in love with you. You can share his soul. Yes, I will help you, but it will cost you pain. I will give you a drink which will turn your tail into legs. All who see you will think you are the most beautiful lady in the world, and you will dance divinely. But every step you take will feel like sharp knives cutting into your legs and feet. And remember this. Once you have lost your tail, you can never return home or be a mermaid again. And if you do not win the prince's love, and he marries another, you will die of a broken heart and turn into sea foam.
As frightened and pale as death, the little mermaid whispered,
Yes, I am willing to do it.
There is more,
continued the witch.
You must also pay me. I want your finest treasure, your beautiful voice. That will leave you with 2 things only. A beautiful, graceful body and wondrous eyes which will speak for you. Are you afraid? If not, put out your little tongue, and I will cut it off for payment.
Trembling, the little mermaid remembered her love for the prince and did so. The sea witch quickly cut out her tongue and gave her the drink. Away the princess swam for one last look at her sleeping family. Unable to speak, she sadly threw final kisses to them. The next morning, the little mermaid swam to the prince's castle. There she drank the witch's drink. A sharp pain went through her delicate body, and she fainted. As the sun began to shine, she awoke. Standing beside her was the handsome prince. She looked down and saw that her tail was gone, and in its place were 2 perfect feet. The prince asked her how she had come there, but she was not able to answer. He then took her by the hand up to his castle. Each step was as if she were walking on knives, but she did not show her pain. Feeling the prince's hand in hers made her so happy that she moved with astonishing grace and beauty. She was dressed in splendid silk clothes, and everyone agreed she was the most beautiful lady in the castle. She wished to sing for the prince, but could not. Nor could she tell him she had given up her voice for him. When she danced, however, everyone was stunned by her beauty and grace, and her eyes spoke clearly of her love. With each step, though, the pain was like stepping on knives, but her face showed only joy when she smiled at the prince. At night, she would often cool her burning feet in the sea. One night, her family came. They told her how lonely they were without her, and then swam away. Day by day, the prince cared more about her. He loved her like a dear good child. He had, however, no idea of marrying her.
Don't you love me best?
Her eyes asked him.
Yes, of course I do, because you are the dearest girl to me,
answered the prince.
You are just like the young girl I once saw. I was lying on the beach, and she saved me. I will never stop loving her, even though she lives in a faraway temple, and I cannot see her.
Oh, he does not know that I saved his life,
sadly thought the little mermaid.
and I can never tell him.
Time passed by, and one day it was announced that the prince would marry a beautiful princess in the neighboring kingdom. The prince was not happy, however, because he did not love her. He loved the girl in the temple.
If I cannot have that girl whom I truly love,
he said to the little mermaid,
then I would rather marry you, my silent dear, because you resemble her so much.
And he kissed her sweet, silent lips.
But I must visit the princess, and I want you to go with me.
Together they sailed on a splendid ship, and the prince told her stories of ships, fish, and the sea. But of course, the little mermaid knew far better than anyone about such things. When everyone was asleep, she sat and looked into the sea. Her sisters came and looked sadly at her. How much she wanted to tell them of her happiness. The next morning they arrived. For several days after, there were parties and festivals. But strangely, the princess was not there. The king said she was being schooled in a temple far away and would come soon. The next day she arrived. Oh, she was a true beauty. The moment the prince saw her, he knew she was the girl who had saved him.
How very happy I am, he cried to the little mermaid. At last, my dream has come true. Please, be happy for me.
The little mermaid kissed his hand. Her heart felt broken, for his wedding would bring her death, and she would change into foam on the sea. Both kingdoms rejoiced over the news of the marriage, and the wedding was a wondrous event. But the little mermaid could not concentrate on the ceremony, for all she could think of was her beloved prince and her own death. That evening, the wedding couple went aboard a ship. There was much partying, and the little mermaid joined in. Although her feet felt like they were being cut by 1,000 knives, she danced without thought of the pain, for the pain in her heart was worse. This would be the last night she would see the prince, the one for whom she had given up her family, her friends, and her beautiful voice, and the one for whom she had suffered such constant pain. Unaware of these things, the prince took his bride to the splendid tent to rest. The ship became very quiet. Only the little mermaid remained, looking out over the sea. She was waiting for the sunrise, knowing that it would kill her. Suddenly, she saw her sisters. They were pale, and their long, beautiful hair had been cut off.
"We have sold our hair to the sea witch so that you will not die," they said. "She gave us this knife and said that you should kill the prince. As his warm blood falls on your feet, they will grow together again into a fishtail. You will then be a mermaid and once more can return to us, where you will live your 300 years. Hurry! Either he or you must die before the sun rises."
And away they swam. The little mermaid drew back the purple curtain from the tent door where the couple slept. She looked at them lying lovingly in each other's arms. The knife shook in her hands, and she knew she could not kill her beloved prince. Quickly, she threw the knife into the sea. Then, once more, she looked at her love and jumped into the water. Instantly, her body dissolved into foam. The sun was warm on the sea foam, and the little mermaid felt nothing of death. She found herself rising up from the foam and floating with other spirits whose speech was like music. Humans could neither hear nor see them.
"Where am I going?"
she asked, and her voice sounded heavenly like theirs.
"We are the daughters of the air," they answered. "Just like you, we have no souls. We earn eternal life through our good deeds. Since we are daughters of the air, we bring cool, healthy breezes and lovely smells to people. After we have worked for 300 years and have done all we can to help others, we will receive eternal life like men. You, little mermaid, have done good deeds. Join us, and after 300 years, you will also receive eternal life."
The little mermaid looked up at God's Son, and for the first time felt tears in her eyes. On the ship, people were awakening. She saw the prince and his bride looking for her. They looked at the foam as if they knew she had jumped into the water. The little mermaid kissed the bride on her brow, smiled at the prince, and happily flew away with the other daughters of the air. The Steadfast Tin Soldier.
"Soldiers! Soldiers!"
cried the boy, opening his birthday box. There they sat, 25 identical tin soldiers, all dressed in smart red and blue uniforms, and each carrying a gun. The boy quickly set up the soldiers. As he examined each one, he noticed one soldier had only one leg. Nevertheless, he stood as tall and straight as the others. Beside the soldiers was a delightful paper castle. Looking closely, one could see through the tiny windows into the rooms. Little trees stood around a small lake made from a mirror, and paper swans on the surface. In the castle door stood a pretty little paper lady wearing a dainty dress. She was a dancer and held one leg so high it touched her cheek.
"She would be the perfect wife for me,"
thought the tin soldier.
"but she is much too beautiful. Her home is a castle, and I only have a box. Oh, I have nothing to offer her."
As evening came, the other soldiers were closed in their box, and Boy's family went to bed. Now was the time for the toys to play. Such a noise they made, playing and singing. The toy soldiers could hear them and wanted to join in the fun, but they could not get the lid off the box. Two toys, however, did not move: the tin soldier and the little dancer. They both stood stiffly on one leg, and the soldier never took his eyes off the beautiful dancer. A jealous toy goblin suddenly shouted,
Soldier, for goodness sake, don't stare at the beautiful dancer.
The soldier pretended not to hear.
Okay, just wait until tomorrow,
The goblin warned.
You'll be sorry.
The next morning, the boy put the tin soldier on the windowsill. Suddenly, a gust of wind, made by the goblin, blew through the window and knocked the soldier outside to the ground 4 floors below. It was a long, long fall. Upon landing, his one leg was up in the air, resting against his cap, and his gun was stuck between 2 stones in the road. The boy quickly ran outside and began searching for the soldier. He looked and looked, but could not find him. If the little soldier would have shouted, "Look, here I am!" he could have easily been found, but he did not think it was proper behavior for a military man to shout while in uniform. Presently, it began to rain. It poured. The boy raced back home. When the rain stopped, 2 boys came walking down the street.
Wow, look at that! A tin soldier! Let's make a boat and sail him in the rainwater,
they said. They made one from an old newspaper and put the soldier inside. Away he went down the gutter, with the boys running beside, clapping their hands. The paper boat sailed up and down, and sometimes whirled around, but the soldier bravely looked straight ahead, holding his gun against his shoulder. Suddenly, the boat sailed into a tunnel, and everything went black.
"Where on earth am I going?"
thought the brave soldier.
"It must be that goblin again, playing mean tricks on me. Oh, if only the beautiful dancer were here, this place would not seem so dark."
At that moment, a big water rat who lived in the tunnel swam beside the paper boat.
Where is your ticket?
He asked. The frightened soldier did not speak, but held his gun even tighter. The boat rushed on, and the angry rat swimming behind, yelling,
Stop that boat! That soldier has not paid his toll.
Faster and faster the boat went, when, much to the soldier's joy, he saw daylight ahead. Just then, there was a loud roaring sound, and the tin soldier's heart began to beat very fast. Looking ahead, he saw that the tunnel flowed into a big, dangerous canal. There was no way to stop the boat now. It whirled around 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and began to fill with water. Even knowing he would surely sink, the brave soldier remained at attention. The wet paper became weaker until finally the soldier fell through. At that very minute, a fish swam up and swallowed him. Oh, it's darker here than in the tunnel, thought the soldier. Then the fish began jumping about wildly, and just as suddenly stopped. What was happening? After a while, there was a flash of light, and someone said, "Look here, a tin soldier!" The fish had been caught, taken to market, sold, and carried home to a kitchen where the cook had just cut it open. Carefully, she pulled out the tin soldier and then rushed about showing everyone the brave soldier who had just traveled about inside a fish. The soldier, however, did not feel at all proud. He looked around. Could it be possible? There he was, right back in the little boy's house. There were the boys, and there was the lovely dancer. They silently looked at each other. Then, to everyone's surprise, someone picked up the soldier and, for no good reason, threw him into the fireplace. The heat was terrible, and he could feel himself melting. Still standing at attention, he looked at the dancer. At that moment, a breeze blew her over directly into the fire next to him. The next morning, when the fireplace was cleaned, the maid found the little tin soldier melted into the shape of a tiny tin heart.